All right, so welcome back to any of those who are actually watching these. These are my Yap sessions for my book series that I am slowly trying to write and having trouble putting words to the page. So I use these little videos to help just kind of speak my thoughts out. My name is James Sheese, and I am currently working on the book series called The Hybrid. And last time I talked about specifically the relationship between two characters and why they didn't end up together. And I realized that what I should probably do if I'm actually going to, post these is go over the actual characters themselves. Um, just the main specific characters. Just a brief overview of what their abilities are. This will be, you know, spoiler heavy, I guess, for a thing that's not even written. So go figure there. But well, maybe I'll keep the spoilers down. Maybe I'll just go into some of what their abilities are and kind of where they place in the story and all that. So the first and most obvious character would be the main character, whose name is V, spelled VEE. V is the hybrid. Shocker. In this world and in this kind of chain of events of everything, there are two primary sentient races that come from the mythology that I created that follows the beliefs of life and death. On the life side of this equation, we have humanity. Humans are very similar to how we are today, an advanced race, standard life cycles, unless you are empowered in a certain way. Humans in this world, 500 years before the events of the series, were afflicted by a virus. This virus was at first wiping out humans en masse until the company, which is its name in italicized in the text, the company, very original, came out with an antivirus that helped lessen the effects and keep some people immune to the negative effects. And this virus eventually spread through all of humanity to the point that it pretty much became bonded to our genetic code. What the virus actually ended up doing was opening up humanity to sources of life, to bolsterings of power. And they had two subcategories. They have elementals and energy users. V is in the energy user category, and his human half makes him a channeler, which is a human who can move energy from one source into another, whether that source be an object or their own bodies. And when they channel into their own bodies, the type of energy they channel typically influences what boost they get. In V's case, he can channel electricity, which gives him even more enhanced speed and the ability to, of course, supercharge metal objects. He can only channel really electricity. V has some other special abilities with channeling. He can channel the life force out of people. That's more related to his split physiology, not a typical channeler ability. The other half of the equation are creatures of death, known as the vampires. They are not undead. They are not dead creatures. They just come from death. They were created on the other continent. They exist as a race of people who can consume anything but themselves. They are fast. They are strong. Their bones are hollow. They have a light, almost pink pigment to their skin, very like pale red. But they do have a downside. They are affected by the sun. They burn in the sunlight, like traditional vampire lore that we create in the real world. My vampire is spelled Vampyres, specifically burn in the sunlight because sunlight is from life, and therefore they are the antithesis of light, so they burn in sunlight, yada, yada, yada. No, we're not going to get into the fact that the moon is just reflecting the light of the sun. We're not getting into that. So, the vampires all have abilities tied to death, and they're shadow-based abilities usually. Manipulations of the death, transformations, controlling the darkness around them, yada, 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 etc. That's all explained actually in the book. V's shadow ability is a corrupted form that comes from how he was made, that basically just gives him a blanket shield around his body, just an aura of darkness that he can't really control. It just pops up when he's in danger. It helps him hide in the darkness. It helps him resist the effects of other shadow abilities, and it does offer little protection from other attacks, but it's not something he can usually control. So V is a scientific experiment. His mother, who is from a prominent vampire line, fell in love with Chief Hugh Dandros of the Northern Isles after his first wife tragically passed in childbirth. They fell in love. She got pregnant. Her natural ability as a vampire and as her shadow ability from her lineage gave her incredibly enhanced regeneration, that could like let her regrow limbs in a moment. And she was concerned with the um, bi oh dear, brain turned off for a second. Sorry, with the uh, dual species pregnancy combined with her increased regeneration, that it would cause problems for the pregnancy. So she went to the company, who was, at as far as everyone else knew, very trusted, and uh, would just ask for help, making sure the baby came to term and properly and all that. She shouldn't have done this. She didn't know. They used her pretty much as a way to create their ultimate weapon, a creature that could kill both vampires and humans easily, and who could probably have a shelf life, so they could have him die young, so they could make more of him later and improve. So, long story short, V was born with a corrupted healing factor from his mother, energy based channeling abilities from his dad's human side, and was raised in combat and pain, and to be an assassin infiltrator type of creature for the company. Now, what does V look like? V, by the time that we reach around book 2, where he's fully grown, is around 5'8". He's on the shorter side. He has skin so pale that it is gray. His eyes are red with black scalia. I think that's how you pronounce it. Pretty much where our eyes are white, his eyeball is black. And he has red irises. Or sorry, red pupils. No, sorry, red irises, black pupils. My bad. Apologies. And they have a unique feature due to his split lineage that he can actually cause his irises to split like they're undergoing mitosis. It's mostly an intimidation factor, but it also does have the benefit that it ups his perception. It's having 2 points, almost like how a housefly works, where they have those compound eyes that they can see in multiple directions. He has brown hair that often looks a little greasy. Oftentimes is also swept away from his head, pulled back in a manner. In the first book, it's kind of just a few inches long and all kind of spiky and, like I said, pulled back. In later books, it gets longer, right around to his between his ears and his shoulders most of the time. V often is seen wearing some form of either robes of the vampire people of his standings, because his mother was, of course, related to the king of the vampires, his uncle, and he worked for his uncle later on. And V has, or he's wearing like his gray tight mesh suit with yellow plates over it for protection. He also has been seen wearing metallic leggings and greaves, metal like leg plates and full footwear greaves that his brother made for him that accentuate his kicks. He has a sword that is stylized kind of like a falchion. It's a one and a half handed weapon, about a 2.5 to 3 foot blade. It is kind of a front heavy thing that's not really used for skill, finesse of cutting, more like chopping, like an axe, which is kind of what the falchion was used for. And he has his dagger. V's abilities include channeling electricity, as I said earlier, to increase his already enhanced speed. He has enhanced strength. His healing factor is not quite one where it regrows limbs, but pretty much so long as his body is intact, he will continue to produce adrenaline and his body will refuse to die until it can heal whatever's damaged. He can, of course, be killed, decapitation, disintegration, those type of things. And he can lose limbs, and they won't really regrow unless he immediately reattaches it and hopes. He can consume the blood of others to heal himself. He can consume energy to heal himself, but both are risky. V has this bad habit of accidentally channeling his own life force, which he has a higher supply of thanks to his vampire side, but unfortunately for him, burns through it rather quickly. He then learns, of course, to lifesteal, but oftentimes uses it on vampires, which vampires aren't creatures of life. So what he's doing is he's stealing their energy for existing, which, to equate it, is like it's a very inefficient fuel source for him. Say that he absorbs 100 years of life potential left in a vampire, how much they could potentially still live. He might get a year's worth of energy out of that 100 that he takes. It is not efficient, which is why he has absorbed so many of them over the background between books 1 and 2. V, of course, like I said, is incredibly fast, can move faster than the eye can track casually. He can enhance even faster to go various machs of speed. His combat speed and combat awareness is fast, and he can watch time slow to a crawl and see a lightning bolt slowly arc across the sky. His durability is very impressive. He's just hard to kill, and he is determined to win any fight that he gets into. That's kind of what defines him. He's childish. He finds joy in the violence and the killing because that was what he was trained to do, so he would stay somewhat human instead of just being a mindless machine that just attacks everything. And the story follows his progression from being a disposable tool into the kind of harbinger to the end of the planet. And his role in taking more of a leadership position and then taking up more of a responsibility of overseeing other people instead of being the one who is, overseen and cast away. That's V, kind of in a nutshell. There's so much more to the character that's hard for me to explain without going on too much of a rant. But I think before we get too winded, we'll go into the next character. Probably the next most important character in the series from a plot standpoint. We have Fred. Frederick Pollard, at the time that we meet V is 8, Frederick is 11. So he's 3 years older than V at the beginning of the series. Frederick Pollard is a fire elemental, meaning that he has the powers to control, manipulate, and create flames, fire. And he can use a multitude of powers from this. He can fly, he can turn into smoke and ash, he can shoot massive columns of flame, he can create tornadoes of flame and heat, he can vaporize things just by touching them, he can detonate his own body like a nuclear explosion. He's incredibly powerful. He's the second most powerful character, mortal's wrong. Second most powerful non-concept character in the series. And he is the reason why the world explodes at the end of book 5, like the epilogue. He's the destruction of everything. And I should note that he's effectively immortal in that he can reincarnate. So every time he detonates his body, he effectively kills himself and then comes back from the ashes, much like the phoenix. From the ashes, much like the phoenix, my goodness. Fred. So it should be an important note. I think I'll go over all the elementals shortly after Fred here, because it'll be easier to explain. Elementals specifically draw their powers from their emotions. And there's usually specific emotions tied to each element. These are not like they have to use this emotion specifically, but they're most powerful when they are in this state of mind, for the most part. Fire elementals, which are incredibly rare, in fact, Fred was one of the first ones seen in hundreds of years, draw their emotional powers from heightened emotions. Fear, joy, anger, sadness, anxiety, these type of things that are in a heightened state, they are more powerful because you fuel the flame. There's a lot of allegory in there. The reason why there aren't many fire elementals is because of what they represent. The other three elementals all represent things of life. You have ice and its effects on the temperature and climate. You have earth, and how it affects the planet, of course. You have storms, which affects the air and the atmosphere. Fire does not really exist truly as part of the natural aspects of the planet. It is the imagery of heat. It is the imagery of conversion of energy into, another form of matter, I guess. Converting matter into energy. It is consumption. It is destruction. Yes, it leads to, new growth, but typically fire is not something that builds things. It tears it down. And that falls into the origin of it, which I've said in another video that I don't think is posted. Fire elementals come from the fact that there was once a plague created by death called burn, which was a concept and manifestation of fire. And it is what grew to become man's fear of fire. It grew too powerful, so death struck him from the sky. Burn crashed into the planet below and became a natural geographical location known as the Great Southern Fire Ridge that divides the eastern and southern portions of the continent. So this fire ridge is a chaotic mess of voices and personalities that are not all quite there, and this stems from Fred's most interesting ability, which comes from how I named him. Fred's code name when he works with the company and is training is he is the pyromancer. Pyromancy is the ability to see the future or see visions through the flames. So Fred's ability, his primary one that he doesn't use a lot, but is kind of a background thing in the book all the time, is Fred's ability to see the future through allegory and highly vague predictions. And that comes from the fact that he is tied to death. What Fred actually is a phenomena of a reincarnation of the plague burn in a human form. So even if there was another fire elemental, prominent to the story, Fred would be leagues more powerful than him or her, because Fred is pretty much just a couple of steps away from becoming a concept on the same tier of importance as good and evil. Fred has a multitude of powers, as I stated earlier, and he has slightly more akin to that of I would say, obviously the races that we have in today's world is different from this because they are not the same countries, but he would probably have a Central American or Mediterranean, that type of pigment to his skin, slightly more on the middle tone side of things from his mother's side, because his father's white as snow. He has brown hair with a lot of highlights in it, natural highlights. So he gives it kind of a almost orange hair, kind of a little bit of blonde, just a very warm hair, pun intended there. He is of average height, right around 5'11", 6 foot. He grows a scruffy beard over time. He tends to not wear shirts because they burn up too fast. And he kind of wears a heavy trench coat quite often because it was more resistant to his flames and kind of been tempered. The leather had been cured many, many times by his own little outbursts. Fred's story, we start with him being... His is a tragic story most of the time, the tragic of immortality. Because unlike V, they both lived to be about 5,500 years old. Fred kind of loses his mind because he was not meant to live that long, traditionally. But Fred starts out as a very anxious kid who doesn't want to set things on fire, despite the fact that his father's like, no, set things on fire. You have a lot of strength to you. Let's see what you can do. And he would just get very nervous very quickly, and his brother always had to swoop in and help him out. But Fred eventually, of course, evolves into being a teacher. He leads a monastery of future fire elementals. He protects them. He's been a destroyer. He's been inspiration. He's been in the gladiatorial ring. He's done a lot of things. And Fred is kind of just this other person that V always trusts because they went through a lot of stuff together. And they end the world together. So that's Fred, the fire elemental, the pyromancer, the one who can turn into a giant. Well, he can detonate like a nuke. And I should add one last part before I cut off with Fred. I mentioned that he destroys the world. That is because inside of Fred, he can harness part of his power and let it cultivate and grow as the years go by, as this little orb of pure heat, pure, energy. He can rip open his chest or summon it to his hand, and just a little chunk of it detonated most of the bottom portion of the continent. When the whole thing was pierced by V in the end of the entire series, it eradicated the entire planet. And I should also note that I said earlier, and I meant it, he can touch somebody and vaporize them instantly. Because fire is more than just something that burns, it is the conversion of matter into energy. So Fred has control over that because he is the very concept of fires reincarnated into a human body. The next elemental we'll talk about is his older brother, Mason. Mason Pollard is 2 years older than Fred, and he got his dad's powers, which is in the form of ice manipulation. He's an ice elemental. And yes, he's not a water elemental. There is no water elemental. I did not want to copy Avatar too much. I have earth, fire. Instead of water, there's ice. And instead of air, there is storms. And storms and ice can overlap for the water manipulation portion. That is important to note. So, Mason Pollard is the star child of Director Pollard, who does not have a first name at the time of this recording. And Mason's story is about realizing that he does not need to live in his father's footsteps, and he can be himself. Because he spends most of his early life trying to be his dad. His dad was the most powerful ice elemental before he was born, and led armies and was an inspiring presence. And Mason realizes over the course of the story that he, in fact, is not that guy. He's much better at helping individual people. When he is in the army later on, he does it more as a medic because he learns that his powers can heal people. Not to say that he's just some pushover healer. Like, he's not like the trope of like I heal people and therefore I can't do fighting. No. Mason is a beast in combat. He's just, found out that he can also heal people. So Mason's powers are, of course, control over ice, generation of ice. He can freeze a lot of things, but he also can absorb the heat out of almost any source around him. And that is the primary ability of his specific uniqueness, because these are all the elementals in the list are the pure forms of that elemental. They're the most powerful version of an elemental you can ever get. The pure form of an ice elemental is rumored to be the host of the Great Northern Bear. The Great Northern Bear does not exist, at least not in a physical form, or at least not in a true conceptual form. It is a manifestation of the beliefs of the people. Therefore, it doesn't actually exist. The true source of the ice element ability is the Ixtogar, which I don't remember how I spelled it, but I have it written down somewhere. But it is the Ixtogar. The Ixtogar is a life demon. It looks like something that's evil, but it actually comes from life. It lives at the center of the great tundra, far, far up in the north, and it must remain there to keep balance of the climate on the planet, because of the southern fire ridge being, to the south. The Ixtogar, therefore, cannot leave the tundra unless it has a host body. There's just one little problem. The Ixtogar cannot be hosted by a human who has the Great Northern Bear in its belief, because the belief of this bear was so strong. So one day, Director Pollard, who's not a director at this point, but is kind of full of himself, decides that he's going to go investigate this tundra, because the message of the Ixtogar was lost centuries ago. The way this is supposed to work is that should you be someone that the Ixtogar will choose to have as their host, the storm will abate that covers the entire tundra, allowing you to move through it a little more easily. You will find the Ixtogar, you will fight the Ixtogar, and the Ixtogar will let you win so long as you are worthy. Director Polar didn't know all this and was definitely not the proper host. He was just powerful enough that he could walk right through that storm with little issue, and when he fought the Ixtogar did not let him win, but lost anyways. And of course, I mentioned the problem is that Great Bear. Director Polar is a big believer in the Great Northern Bear. He sees it as a great sign of strength, to be as ferocious as a bear. So the hostdom is passed to his eldest son when he is born. So Mason was born with the Ixtogar already inhabiting his body. And as such, it kind of melded with his consciousness to become kind of like a sixth sense. Not fully a different personality, but just an aspect of his personhood. The Ixtogar is a 4-armed, 8-foot tall demon of ice covered in ice shards and looks like it has an enlarged skull with no skin. It looks terrifying. It has large tusks that jut out and spiky ice hair that comes off the back of its skull like head. All that. The main ability... Sorry, one moment. The main ability of the Ixtogar is this kind of aura that it keeps around itself that it can use to absorb all the heat nearby, which is what forms frost and crystals around it. This is something that Mason has access to. Mason's future abilities that he gets throughout the series include things like generation of ice-based weapons in his hands, the ability to counteract his brother's incredible heat, and the ability to stop time around him as he freezes down all of the molecules to 0 degrees Kelvin, which absolute zero means that there is no energy being diffused, no energy being used by the molecules, meaning they are frozen in place, effectively giving him the ability to just look like he teleports, but he just walks, and everything around him is frozen. So he moves really, really fast, it looks like. So, that's Mason. Mason, of course, looks like the spitting image of his father. Tall, probably like 6'3" or 4", broad-shouldered, good musculature, hair white as snow, skin incredibly fair, piercing light blue eyes. Despite how, sharp his features are, he has a very warm smile and a very warm personality. He's always looking to help people. He's always looking to better himself. And he had to do some really self-discovery when he realized that his brother didn't need his help anymore. So he had to figure out what he's going to do with his life. That's Mason. Up next, we have, we'll go with our Earth Elemental, who is named Tashari. Tashari Dandros of the Northern Isles. The Northern Isles are a separate area of, in between the two continents that is a archipelago of islands surrounded by tall mountain peaks. It kind of creates this enclosed lagoon, like massive mini ocean type thing. Tashari is the heiress of the Dandros fortune and leadership position, and the Northern Isles especially are very tied to the earth, and they have a lot of meditations and ceremonies that worship the bountifulness of the earth and how blessed they are. Tashari is born as a pure form elemental of the earth. As such, she has great manipulation of stone, dirt, sand, sediment, anything that touches the ground pretty much. Plant life is kind of out of her realm. No one really controls plant life for reasons I won't get into, but most stone-based things. She can also meld into stone. She can turn her body into different types of rocks and gemstones. She can turn herself into sand. She can grow in size. She can create tendrils of earth to attack. She can transmute stones into various different types of ores and minerals. Her ultimate ability as a pure form is the Golem, which is where she just becomes the size of a mountain. A giant, earthy, golem-looking creature the size of a mountain that she has done on a few occasions. Unlike fire and ice elementals, she does not have as good of a healing factor when... I forgot to mention that. The Ixtogar has the best healing in the entire series, capable of regrowing a limb as it's being cut off. Fred is pretty good at healing, as he can regenerate his whole body by, blowing himself up. Tashari has a decent healing factor when she's in her golem form, just the sediment can just reform, but it's not as good as the other two. Tashari is 4 foot, like, I think I made her 4'10". She's a short little thing. She is rebellious, but keeps to herself at the same time, as in she has a lot of big thoughts and a lot of funny things to say. She much prefers to watch people. So if you get her alone, she's going to talk your ear off, but she looks all like proper in person. She meditates quite often. She has a huge gambling issue. That is like her little flaw, is that she loves to gamble with things that she does not have. She's rich, but she loves to gamble. She keeps her hair short, kind of in a bob, I think would be the right term for it. Maybe, I don't know if that's the right term. But she wears more of the traditional attire for people. And the Earth Elemental can get pretty powerful, very, very strong, extremely dangerous. Tashari doesn't really ever properly lose a fight. There's some close calls, but she is quite the powerhouse no matter what scenario she's in throughout the series. And she's also V's half-sister and a twin to another character on this list. Our final elemental is... Oh, 1 second. Backtrack real quick. It's mentioned before with ice elementals that they believe the bear is their form of power. So they usually have a lot of pride and belief in themselves and courage and confidence, thinking that's more power. Not really. Ice elementals benefit actually from how the Ixtogar works, which is by feeling absolutely nothing. Just being completely a big old zero on the emotional list. Just letting everything go and just kind of existing. Puts you kind of in the zone. Earth elementals are kind of the opposite of fire elementals, where they can feel really any emotion as long as it is reined in and calmed down. Not zero like an ice elemental, but just toned back. Which leads us to our final elemental, storm elementals. Storm elementals are one of the most common ones, actually, because having the slight ability to adjust the wind around you is not much of a power, but a lot of humans have gotten it. Out of the small population that get powers. Storm elementals, unlike the other three, get their abilities strictly through rage, just through one emotion, the raging storm. The angrier you are, the more powerful storm elemental you'll be. And that introduces to May. May, daughter of Sarah. I believe I made her last name May Van Red. May comes from the northern portion of the continent, from a small village that was attacked constantly by ferals, which are a special type of reanimated vampire that are abominations and not really that sentient. Her powers manifested when she got angry at the fact that her cousin was being taken away from her to go do wall duty, and she lost her marbles at the young old age of 9 and accidentally blew down all the walls around the village, leading to the massacre of her family and people. She was rescued by V and Tashari on one of their missions. They were happening by, and she became part of the company's roster of new students. As stated, May's power comes from her rage, and she, for some reason, has uncontrollable amounts of it. She cannot control her anger. It is always being produced. She has something in her brain that continues to create the chemical that promotes frustration and anger. As such, as she grew older, she began to develop the taste for alcohols to dull her senses enough that she can be pleasant around people without, constantly fuming. She is the fastest flying character, barring her cousin, because he is basically God. She has no air resistance, as she can fly through the sky unabated by pressure. She can summon massive storm clouds, lightning bolts, work on vibrations. She can lift other people around her, create tornadoes. She has a very impressive power where she can increase the pressure around objects to crush them, almost like she has gravity abilities, or increase the pressure around her body to deflect attacks and block her from incoming damage. If you throw a rock at her, it'll break against the air pressure before it gets to her. She has even used this power to deflect a laser beam, which is utter bullshit. But I thought it was cool that she could maybe change the pressure in front of her enough that it affects and bended the light of a laser. She's, like I said before, she's fast. She can clap her hands together and create a shockwave that travels for miles before impacting into someone and knocking him into a wall. She has an incredible sense of, perception, as she can feel the air around her. Her downside being that she has virtually no healing ability. She just heals twice as fast as the average human does, which is pretty slow in the context. She's kind of a glass cannon in that respect. She is the third most powerful character on this list. She is impressive, and you should be scared of her, and I love her to death. She is 6'4", fair-skinned, as are most who come from the north. Light brown hair, angular face, piercing eyes. Very, like I said, tall, 6'4". Towers over most. She and V are in a relationship, which is funny because he's 5'8". And she is fun. Her character goes through a lot of things, but overall, she was very fun to adapt and create over the few years. That's me. I think I'm going to cut it off there for now, just so the video doesn't get too long. But that is the first 5 characters out of the main 10 for the hybrid. So thanks.